for two reasons. The first is that I am delighted that Deborah Cadman, the Chief Executive of Birmingham City Council, is joining us in order to answer all of your questions. And the second is to allow for greater accessibility to our ward forum meetings for those who wouldn't normally be able to attend an in-person meeting on a weekday evening. So going forward, we're going to have a mix of in-person meetings on, in person and online, based on the demand of our residents. So moving us along in the agenda, as we're virtual, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please do keep yourself on mute in order for us not to get any kind of feedback on microphones and speakers, and so that everyone can hear our guests and their contributions. I should also notify everyone this evening as well that this is a public meeting. Residents are allowed to record part or all of the meeting. So if you don't wish to be seen on any recordings produced by residents or by Birmingham City Council, then please do turn off your camera. We are waiting for Sharon to join us, but she should be along shortly. I understand that she was travelling back from somewhere else in the country to be back in Birmingham this evening for our meeting. So I will move us on to our first item, which is our question and answer session with the Chief Executive of Birmingham City Council, Deborah Cadman. Just in terms of kind of introduction, Deborah joined the council, I believe, in June 2021. I hope I got that right, from the West Midlands Combined Authority, and has since been working with both the previous leader and our new leader, Councillor John Cotton. So at this point, I will hand over the mic, Deborah, to you to give a little bit of an introduction, and then we will ask for hands for questions to Deborah. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor, and thank you for inviting me. And I recognise some of you from a visit that I made, I think it was last summer, and I met several of you there. So it's really good to see you again. I expect that you're probably keen to kind of hear about the financial situation we're in at the moment. I'll talk to you a little bit about commissioners and what intervention means. And I'll spend just a little bit of time giving you some reassurance about how we're dealing with the financial challenges that we've got at the moment. I've been speaking to a whole range of people and organisations, as you would expect, over the last kind of few months, and there's some real anxieties about what this means for Birmingham as a place. And I've kind of described it as Kaplunk. And for those of you that know Kaplunk, it's you've got lots of sticks in a kind of cylinder, and you've got lots of marbles on the top. And I've kind of described it as Birmingham City Council at this moment in time is one of those sticks that's been pulled out. Now, the really important thing to understand is, although the stick is being pulled out, and we'll be shoving it back in as soon as we possibly can, the marbles have not fallen through. Now, I use that as an example to say that although Birmingham City Council is dealing with some really big, tricky and challenging financial issues at the moment, it does not mean that Birmingham as a place is falling apart. Quite the reverse. And what it has done is made us be far more creative and innovative in the way in which we are working with our partners. And what I would say, many of our partners, police, health, the community sector, the voluntary sector, residents themselves, and the private sector actually have all said, actually, we've got invested interest in supporting the residents of this city and ensuring that Birmingham continues to function and deliver the support it needs to those most in need. So I did want to kick off by trying to give you a little bit of reassurance about how, it does feel in the press and the way in which it's portrayed that, the whole world is falling apart. And it's difficult, it's tricky, and I'm not underplaying the challenges in front of us by any stretch of the imagination. But I did want to reassure you that Birmingham as a place is still functioning. Now, we have commissioners in at the moment, and the Secretary of State announced on October the 5th that he was using his intervention powers, and he asked a number of commissioners to come and work with us. Now, we are working collaboratively and well with the commissioners. It's still hard, it's still difficult, and we're still finding our way on some of the kind of governance arrangements. But the commissioners are absolutely clear that they want to work with us to do a number of things. They want us to deal with some of the issues that have triggered intervention, and that's, for those of you that have been involved in the council will know, the job evaluation and equal pay liability is something that has been going on for 10 years and has now been exposed as something that cannot continue to kind of open the kind of dam of liability, which is how it feels at the moment. So we're introducing a job evaluation scheme. We're working closely. We've got a new relationship with the trade unions, and we're stemming the liability and delivering equality, or we will deliver equality for all of our staff. But that was the big trigger. That was the big trigger for the organisation. And then issues around governance, and then there were concerns around services. So you know that we're in intervention for SEND, but what I would say for education, special education needs service, we have seen dramatic improvement in that service. And part of that is because we were in intervention last year, we have a commissioner, and it has delivered an improvement plan that is making a step change difference in the services that we're able to give to those young people in our communities. So I say that because intervention, you know, and the involvement of commissioners isn't always a negative thing, and it has driven the organisation to focus on improving a really critical service in the council. The other concern that we are dealing with at the moment is waste, and I know for several of you in this ward, waste collection, refuse collection, waste, street scene is still a major issue. And you know, I'm really happy to talk to you about the work that we're doing on redesigning our waste service. What I would say as well is the financial position. You will have read a lot of it in the press, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about that. But it is a big challenge for us. We have got to deliver a balanced budget next February, and that means we have got to make significant savings and transformation. We will, in addition to that, make sure that the organisation is fit for purpose. So we're doing a lot of work on organisational redesign. We're looking at making the organisation leaner and smaller. But we will have to close 164.8 million budget gap for next year. So I'm sure you can appreciate that is a big challenge for us to try and deliver. But the assurance, such as I can give it to you, we will make those savings with a number of principles in mind. So we will protect the most vulnerable. There's a statutory duty for us to deliver services for the elderly and children, but actually there's a moral duty as well. In my view, there is a moral duty for us to continue to protect the most vulnerable. Your bins will still be collected, and you know there is a view that we will need to change the frequency of refuse collection, etc., but we will do that in consultation with the involvement of local people. Critical services for citizens will continue to run, and Birmingham as a place will continue to be open for business. We're being extremely thoughtful about our spend, so we have very tight spend control. So every item of expenditure is reviewed against sets of criteria. So non-essential spend is now stopping. So I think introducing that discipline means that the way in which we manage our budget financially, the way in which we manage the organisation financially through tight budget controls can only help introduce a level of discipline and grip that we didn't have before. We're also required to deliver an improvement plan, and that plan will need to be developed within 6 months. And it will focus on transformation. It will also focus on outcomes. So what outcomes do we want and need for the people of this city? We also need to become financially sustainable. And in order to do that, we need to be well run, well governed, delivering good basic services. So that is the focus, delivering good basic services for the people of this city. And then I appreciate that this is a lot of information, and hopefully a lot of it is consistent to the information that you've had previously and the information that you've read. There is a lot going on. I appreciate that there will be a lot of anxiety in our communities that we are trying to address, but we're absolutely clear that the organisation will come out of this challenge a much better focused organisation, focused on delivering the basics, getting the basics right, but actually targeted on meeting the needs of those that need us most. And I'm really happy now, and hello, Councillor Thompson, I see that you've joined us, but I'm really happy to spend the time that we've got now with me answering questions, as many questions as I can. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Deborah. Really appreciate that, and I'm sure that our residents do as well. I can see some hands that have gone up already. I will take them in order, giving priority, of course, to those who are our residents. So, Peter, if I can bring you in first, please.
Right, okay. Thank you very much, Deborah, for that summary of where you are with the council. You mentioned the evaluation of jobs, that issue needing to be resolved. From what I've read in the press, the other major issue that has caused problems with the finances in the council is the implementation of the business systems with an Oracle-based system. The impression that emerges from the press reports is that the system isn't fit for purpose, that it's grossly overrun, and there's no kind of endpoint in view. We can't see the point at which those systems will be functioning effectively and cost effectively. So I wonder if you could just give us a statement about, or a summary of where things are with that, and what the solution to this apparent mess will be, and when it will be resolved.
So the Oracle system is a system that is fit for purpose. The challenge has been our implementation of it. And we pressed the button, it's almost 18 months ago now, to say that we would move from one ERP system to Oracle, and we weren't ready. And the processes weren't in place, the training wasn't in place for staff, we did workarounds, and it just didn't work. So we were not ready, and we did not do the preparation that we should have done before we pressed the button to transfer over to Oracle. Now, Oracle works perfectly well in a whole range of other organisations. It is our implementation. Now, what I would say is Oracle as an organisation is a global organisation, and they are just as committed as we are as fixing this, because it's their brand that is at stake here as well. So we're working really close with Oracle. We've got to stop the workarounds. We've got to move to a compliant point, which we are in a position to do at the end of the year. And then we start to develop an optimization of the system as well. So it hasn't, we haven't covered ourselves in glory. It was incompetently led, and we pressed the button on the understanding that everything was okay. And then, 6 months down the line, we realised that everything wasn't okay. So by the end of the year, we will have gone through the first stage to make it compliant. And then from January through to the next 12 months, we will optimise the implementation of Oracle, working with Oracle as an organisation, but working with other IT clients and partners to make it as optimal as it possibly can be. But it has been, we have not covered ourselves in glory, and I cannot defend the way in which we didn't address the issues of Oracle earlier than we should have done, for a variety of reasons.
Thanks for that, Deborah. I'm going to bring in now the second hand that was raised, that was Alison. If you'd like to unmute, Alison, and Peter, if I could get you to lower your hand for now, that'll be grand. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah, and I think that was really helpful. In the media, 3 different areas are being talked about in terms of getting us back to a balanced budget, and that's selling assets, cutting services, and increasing council tax. And is that correct? Are those the 3 main areas that basically will get us back to a balanced budget? And if they are you able to give us any indication of percentage-wise, what will it look like in terms of the savings? How is it going to be broken down percentage-wise in relation to those 3 main areas?
Yeah, and Alison, I can't give you the percentage breakdown, because we are, there will be more or less of some of those elements that we are developing at the moment. So, but I'll talk you through it. So, alongside selling assets, and I'll talk to you about the detail around that. Culling services, increasing council tax, increasing income generally, addressing duplication, because we've got a lot of duplication in the organisation, and delivering greater effectiveness and efficiency around the services that we give as well. So it's more than just those three elements that you raised, and it's got to be. So I'll go through all of them in turn. So in terms of selling assets, we have got to sell some of the assets, and we are asset rich as an organisation, but we've got to sell the right assets in the right way at the right time. So we are resisting any notion of a fire sale. And I'm sure you can appreciate there are lots of people that are a lot of organisations that are circulating the council at the moment saying, oh, I'll buy that, thinking they're going to get it as a cheap deal. They're not. There are significant assets that this organisation needs to keep hold of, because they are assets that will give us a significant ongoing return over a period of time. So if I talk to you about some of the assets that we own in Edgbaston around High Speed 2 station. Now, it doesn't matter what you think about High Speed 2, but the reality is that will bring in huge amounts of investment and development in that part of the city. So the asset holdings that we've got, it wouldn't be sensible for us to sell those assets at this moment, when we know over a period of time we will get an income stream that will far outstrip any income that we could get through a sale right now. So I kind of simplify it, but to make the point. So we're doing a lot of work looking at those assets that we need to keep. We will not be selling the pre-Raphaelites, which apparently has been in the press recently. We will not be selling some of the, the central library, etc., etc. So all of those kind of scaremongering that's happening about, we're going to sell everything, we're going to sell the pre-Raphaelites, we're going to sell our heritage and culture. That is not true in terms of assets, but there are significant buildings and land holdings that we are looking to put on the market in the right way and well managed over the next 6 months and 12 months. So there's a kind of total that's been discussed at the moment. I think it's an overinflated total. So we're having some interesting conversations with the commissioners at the moment about the level of asset sales at the moment. But I want to reassure you, there will not be a fire sale. We will be very thoughtful and considered about those assets that we sell. And then culling services, we will need to redesign the council, and there will be some services that we will need to stop. And we're doing things like looking at the companies that we own, for example, and those companies that are not giving us a return, that are more of a liability than an asset. We're thinking about putting those on the market. We're looking at those services that could be better delivered either through the private sector or through the voluntary sector. So we're having different conversations. The most important thing is to protect those services to the most vulnerable. And it might be those services are better delivered by other people than Birmingham City Council. So that's the conversation we're having around, changing services, protecting those services that are needed most, but having, very open conversations about whether Birmingham City Council is the most appropriate organisation to be delivering those services. And then it's about increasing council tax, which is one of those things central government will be requiring us to do. Now, again, it's not that we're resisting it, but we're being very clear about, we are not going to get huge amounts of money by putting up council tax. The council tax base in Birmingham is not great. So if we put the council tax up by 10%, which is not outside the realms of possibility, it will only give us just over £20 million income. Now, one of my previous local authorities was Suffolk County Council. If you put the council tax up by 10%, you would get almost 100 million. And that gives you an indication of the difference in the council tax base between some areas and for Birmingham. So whilst we might be required to do that or forced to do it, that's not going to deliver the kind of savings and income that you would want. Then there's an issue about increasing income. So we're looking at things like car parking, fees and charges. You know, we're looking at everything is on the table at the moment. But equally, we've got to be really thoughtful about the increase in charges, because on one hand, you know, we've just launched the cost of living kind of week, and we're really focused on that. So we can't be then making decisions that put an added financial burden on those families that are struggling most. So again, I want to reassure you that we won't be making decisions about raising fees and charges and income without being really thoughtful about the consequences of doing that as well. And then looking at efficiencies and effectiveness and doing away with duplication. So there are bits of the organisation, you know, there are functions in the organisation that are being delivered 3 or 4 times throughout different directorates, which is madness. So this has given me an opportunity to start looking at all of that duplication and kind of, you know, rooting out that duplication and creating, you know, one service that's delivered from one place. So those are the kind of things that we are looking at. So the response to the financial challenge will not just be straight cuts to services and cuts to staff numbers, but equally, you know, people on this call need to understand that if I reduce the size of the organisation, I have to reduce the size of the workforce. But again, we will be doing that in consultation in a very thoughtful way.
Thanks for that, Deborah.
That's where we are, Alison, on that. Thanks.
I am mindful that we only have you until just after 7. I do want to get a couple more questions in. I am afraid that I know that there are lots of people that would like to make contributions. I am going to have to prioritise people who I understand to be our residents first. So I'm going to bring in Eva. If you want to come in as your hands up, Eva.
Thanks, Marcus, and thanks, Deborah. It's very informative to hear all this. I'm going to try and speak quickly then. When the Edgbaston Reservoir Master Plan was adopted, there was a great deal of concern in the community. But planners reassured the community that the local nature reserve management committee would be an appropriate vehicle through which the community could continue to be involved in shaping developments on the site, and to be used to be made aware of developments. But since that time, no one within the City Council has appeared to want anything to do with the LNR committee. Emails have gone unanswered, meetings are not being held. The question that we tried to put to a full meeting of the council was refused by the legal team when we tried to find out what was going on with the LNR, who was going to be responsible for it. The net result of this is that the Local Nature Reserve Committee hasn't been included as a stakeholder in discussions about the plans for the reservoir, even though there are stakeholders involved. There are other stakeholders involved in those discussions. And secondly, the LNR committee isn't involved at all in the implementation of the new LNR management plan, which was adopted by the LNR committee a couple of years ago. So some things that are in that plan may be happening, but many that were in that plan are not happening. And because the LNR committee isn't meeting, we have no idea of the status of the plan. Can you help us understand what needs to happen in order for the LNR committee to reconvene?
And Eva, I'm sure you appreciate. I don't have that level of detail at my fingertips. So, but if you allow me to kind of take that away and just explore that, and then I can make contact with you through Councillor Bernasconi and Councillor Thompson if I can. But I don't. I mean, I find it odd that engagement with the Local Nature Reserve Committee hasn't happened, and that is a worry. But if you allow me to just understand it a little bit more, and as a minimum, kind of get a member of the planning team to come out and meet you, I'll investigate that.
Thanks.
If I can just chime in, Deborah, on that one, just to kind of echo Eva's remarks, really. And you know, there's been a lot of consternation over the last few years with regards to the Tower Ballroom and the Edgbaston Reservoir Master Plan. And a key part of that consternation, in my opinion, is the council's, I don't want to go as far as saying failure, but inability to consult with key stakeholders who are part of that community, who have, let's be honest, done so much unpaid to promote the reservoir as a local nature reserve and are willing to give up their time. And I think the frustration as a ward councillor for me has been just making sure officers are engaged in that process. We want to see that LNR as a key partner to fulfilling the plan that Eva mentioned, and also making sure that any further development that happens following on from the Edgbaston Reservoir Master Plan is in partnership with those stakeholders. So anything that you can do from the top level to get us a bit of officer accountability on that particular point would be very useful.
Of course. Of course. And apologies, Eva. We shouldn't be in this position. So I'm sorry that you're having to talk to me like this.
Yeah, me too. But thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to bring in one more hand. I'm afraid, because Deborah does need to leave shortly. If I can just bring Patrick in.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but I am next in the queue and have a very specific question for Deborah. I know it's pretty rude of me, I'm sorry. But Deborah, we were awarded funding via the Shared Prosperity Fund in July of this year. That's Future Collective, is our arts organisation. We look after Perrott's Folly, which is based in North Edgbaston. We have been waiting on that funding. For our organisation, it's £40,000. For the city, it's £6 million. It's being administered by your former colleague, Michael Gove. That money was not transferred to the city of Birmingham until the end of August this year. It was supposed to come over in July. All of our organisations were asked to start spending money against this grant or risk losing the grant from July. Many small arts organisations across the city are now in debt. We've been told that money has been ready to go with the West Midlands Combined Authority, who obviously you also used to work for, since the 9th of October. Yet all of our organisations are still waiting on the outcome of that grant. We also have been told that we need to deliver our activities by March 2024, or we will potentially have to give the underspend back. We're being told that the UK government is not responsible for that extension. It's the West Midlands Combined Authority. The West Midlands Combined Authority tells us that they're not responsible for the extension. West Midlands Combined Authority blame yourselves. You blame the UK government blames one another. The net issue with this is that local residents, local people experiencing disadvantage are being grossly impacted by your actions. And as you are the leader of the council, effectively, that's directly at your door. But you're in a unique position to actually expedite the issues and get them resolved. I've emailed you directly. You haven't given me a response. I've emailed Max Caller directly. He's given me one response and then doesn't communicate. We've had a feature in the local news that's not had a response either. Like it's pretty problematic. So because you've started the meeting saying you're committed to supporting residents, what are you going to be doing to support our organisation and the people of Birmingham in this matter? Thank you, and I'm sorry for interrupting. It was just pretty crucial.
No, that's okay. I mean, Councillor Thompson.
Deborah,
Yeah, of course.
Can I just ask you to take one more question from one of our residents, because unfortunately we don't get to have ward meetings on a monthly basis, and it's the first opportunity that our residents get to kind of in a public forum. So can we just take one more question before you answer that one, because I know Patrick's got his hand up and also David, and they are, you know, they're active local residents of North Edgbaston. It's really important that they get to have their voices as well.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to stay until I do that. And Lizzie, I'm not going to be able to answer the detail of that. I'm just not. But what I will do is I'll have to do the investigations around and have conversations with the Combined Authority. And what I would say is Michael Gove is not my colleague. I think I do need to say that. But the Shared Prosperity Fund is a Combined Authority issue which is now being reallocated. But if you're going to have to let me investigate that a little bit more, and again I will have to get back to you on that, because I can't give you the answer on this call, but I will get back to you. And apologies, I genuinely, I mean, I've been on holiday for a bit, but I have not seen your email, so I do apologise, and I will make sure that we can we can find that, and I'll talk to Max Keller as well.
Thanks, Deborah. I'll bring in Patrick and David very quickly because I understand that you do need to go shortly. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Congratulations on your appointment, Deborah. Thank you for your honesty. It's really refreshing. I know you're going to be getting a lot of special pleading during this period, but I'd like to make a special plea to retain the mobile household recycling service, because this is fantastically popular with residents and it works. I was involved with one recently where we collected 20 tons of rubbish, and most of that would have ended up on the streets. So if that could be retained, I think that would be a great asset for the city. And good luck.
Thank you. I need quite a lot of it, but rest assured, the portfolio holder for City Ops is a massive advocate and fan of the mobile household recycling service. So you've got a massive advocate from a political level as well. But again, Patrick, you know, these are the services that have such a profound positive impact on our communities. So you know, rest assured, we will do everything that we can to make sure that those services that are valued by our residents and have the impact that they need to have will be protected as much as we possibly can. So you'll have my commitment that I will feed back, you know, certainly your views into, but rest assured, you know, Councillor Mahmood is a massive advocate of that, and I know he will do everything he can to preserve that service.
You're definitely my favourite Chief Executive of Birmingham City Council.
Thank you for that, Patrick, and thank you for that, Deborah. I'll bring David in just to finish off the round of questions.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for being here tonight, Deborah, and it's really good the way you're speaking very clearly about what's happening, and I love the way you're so optimistic. But for me, I feel very, very pessimistic, because the numbers involved, £1 billion for equal pay, that's not right now, is it? But it's over the next few years. That's an enormous sum that's got to be paid, you know, out of our assets. And I just find it a really frightening situation. And also, I find it really frustrating. No one's really owned up yet to say what went wrong. You know, you're painting this picture of how wonderful the council's going to be and efficient and lean. I mean, that could have been done years ago, couldn't it? But it hasn't been done. But I sort of wonder how the organisation will transform itself from, in my opinion, a not very well functioning organisation into this very smart one. It just seems like it's all a bit mind-boggling, really. And then the Oracle system. How is it so badly managed by? Was it officers? Were the councillors not watching what was happening? You know, there's so many questions, and I know there's going to be an inquiry, but I just find it all very worrying. So anyway, that's my question.
Look, I'm not painting this picture of Nirvana at all, but I am hopefully painting a picture of, you know, we have grip of the challenge. We're absolutely clear of the challenges, and we have been very honest and said, this is not right, and this needs to be fixed and sorted. And we are working in the best way possible to do that. £1 billion, you know, built on the previous kind of equal pay debacle. What I would say is that it is potential liability, it's not actual. But for those of you on this call who are accountants will know that even if it's not actual, I still have to accommodate that potential liability and risk in the budget. And rest assured, we will be doing everything that we can to make the most appropriate settlements in a way that reduces that 720 million significantly lower. But that regardless, I have still got to account for that potential liability. So that's the equal pay. And you're right, it should have been resolved years ago. But for a variety of reasons, it hasn't and wasn't. So, but we are in a position now where we cannot continue to build up that liability because we don't have an appropriate job evaluation scheme, which we now have, which is now being implemented. So the council has taken a very, very brave decision to put the stake in the ground, to redesign and reframe its relationship with its trade unions, with its employers, you know, to say, OK, let's stop, let's build the organisation from here on in. Now, the organisation will be different, it will be smaller and it will be leaner. Now, I don't know about you, but I did not come into public service, and I certainly didn't become a chief executive to make cuts and reduce the services that need to be delivered to those people that need it most. So this is not a place where I would want to be, but it is a place where I am, and it is a place where I need to build this organisation up with, and to a much better place. And that's what I will be doing with your local councillors, with the cabinet, with the political leadership team, with my own officer leadership team, who are all focused on doing the right thing for the residents of this city. But it won't be easy. It will be horrible in places, and it will be really challenging. But if we haven't got that sense of hope and ambition for the organisation, then we might as well pack up and leave. But the way in which we do it is going to be really, really important, which is why engaging with people like you on this call, which is around consulting with our staff, which is a way of involving and developing all of those people that have got to make the tricky decisions, is going to be so important over the next 12 to 18 months. But I don't want you to think that I think this is happy days, because it's not. It's grim.
Thank you for that answer, Deborah, and thank you to David for your question. We did have a couple of questions that came in from people who weren't able to be here this evening, but I'll make sure that those are passed on by email, Deborah, so that our residents can get answers to those questions. I know that everyone is incredibly grateful for your time. You're a very busy person, so to give us 40 minutes of your time in order to answer the questions of residents shows that commitment to transparency at all levels of the council under your leadership. So once again, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's really, thank you, and it's my pleasure to be here. And Eva and Lizzie, I will get back to you with answers to your questions as well. All right. Thank you very
Deborah.
much, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Deborah.
Fab. So I will now move us on to the next item on our agenda, for which we should have Barry Walker from BRSK on the call with us. Just in terms of background on this item, it's incredibly important to us as ward councillors that we're listening to our residents, and that's why we invited Barry from BRSK to speak to us this evening. The issue of the Telegraph pole installations, as the rollout of broadband from BRSK continues across the ward, has caused some consternation in our community. I know that there are people present on the call that would like to kind of share their concerns and thoughts with Barry. We engaged with BRSK in good faith, and we had a meeting with them a few weeks ago where we amplified those concerns of residents and got feedback, and actually an apology from Barry's colleague about the way that the pole installations have been managed so far. But I know that everyone will be keen to ask Barry questions about the pole installations. Please do be mindful he's given up his evening to be with us. So let's engage in good faith on this issue and make sure that we're having a constructive discussion. So at this point, I'm going to bring you in, Barry, if you want to give us a bit of an outline of what work BRSK is undertaking in North Edgbaston ward, the engagement so far with residents, what you think could be improved maybe, before we take a few questions from the floor.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much, Marcus. Okay, so I've seen a few familiar faces on here, so nice to see you all. For those that don't know or have not heard about BRSK, essentially we've been running now for a couple of years, deploying a full fibre broadband network, and the reason behind that, what we're doing, is because obviously what's in place at the moment, i.e. copper, is woefully outdated, and so we're here to kind of offer an upgraded service via full fibre. The majority of our rollout utilises existing BT infrastructure, whether that be underground ducts or poles. And the reason why we do that is because it enables us to deploy at speed and minimise disruption. We have an agreement with BT Openreach to utilise their network. It's not exclusive to us. Other internet service providers are able to do so. It's something that Ofcom decreed several years ago now, because they had a monopoly, and it's there to offer alternatives. In terms of our service, our contracts generally are far more competitively priced than the incumbents. We don't have any contract price rises. Aside of that, we are keen to offer our services not only to residents but also to the wider communities, so places like community centres, schools, essentially any kind of institution that has the need for a broadband service. Talk specifically, I suppose, about kind of North Edgbaston. Yes, there's been some issues around community engagement, and both myself, my colleagues and my leadership team have been thinking and working on ways that we can improve this. We've recently taken on a new member of staff on the community engagement side of things. I've had several interactions with residents and community leaders around the service that we're doing. I've put some things on hold for the time being, with a view to look at alternatives perhaps in the future. So that's kind of, I guess that's sort of us in a nutshell, really. I'm more than happy to kind of take some questions.
Yeah, I'm absolutely going to bring in a round of questions very shortly, Barry. Just want to touch on a few things as part of your comments. The first one being that you made a point that any service provider is able to come into the area, and it's not exclusively BRSK that is performing works or could be able to perform works installing telegraph poles to roll out broadband. So just a little bit of clarity on that. The second, which has been raised with me a couple of times, is you mentioned that it's possible to use existing ducting that exists under pavements for other utilities. Now, I know that one of the concerns from residents has been that it appears that on some occasions BRSK aren't using what is existing ducting in order to roll out the service, and quite possibly, this might be true, this might be not, telegraph poles are being used because they are a cheaper option for BRSK, and therefore that is causing more disruption for residents. So if you just want to cover off those 2 points, and then I'll bring in some hands from our residents.
Yeah, sure. The first point you made, you're right. Other providers can come in. They're essentially under no obligation to have direct conversations. They just go in, raise permits with the local authority, and go and build at will as they wish. I know some of the larger incumbents, they wouldn't sort of necessarily take the time to kind of have those more local based conversations. But we as a company feel it's very important that we do that and do have these conversations. On the second point that you raised around the utilisation of existing network, now kind of to sort of talk about specifics, there will be, for example, you take a road of terraced houses. Now there may be a duct network that runs from one end to the other. However, there wouldn't be a direct link between that duct and somebody's house. That part of the network, that part of Openreach's network, was built at a time whereby they utilised armoured cable, and they would simply bury that cable between the duct and the premise. Now, it may come up on the outside, it may come up somewhere within the property, and there just simply isn't a connection between the duct and the house. And in the case of where we've installed poles, that's the reason why. We would simply have to go and dig up everybody's front garden in order to feed their property. So as you can imagine, the disruption that would potentially cause to do such a thing. So polling is the most straightforward option. It's not, polling isn't a cheaper option at all. The cheapest option is for us to simply use the ducts. But where they don't exist, that's our alternative. Plus, also as well, something also to bear in mind is, if you think, I think of it as we're effectively, last to the party. So there's water pipes, there's gas pipes, there's ducting, there's Virgin Media have come along and put ducting in the ground as well. There's various other services which minimise the ability for us to actually install ducting in the ground. So that in itself is another concern or issue that we simply can't get round.
Okay, at this point, Barry, I'm going to bring in some of the hands from our residents in the order that they were raised. So I think we've got Peter first, if you want to unmute Peter and ask a question of Barry.
Right, thanks very much, Marcus, and thanks, Barry. I first became aware of this when a notice went up on a lamppost. I'm a director of the management company at Magdalen Court. It's a Grade 2 listed building from the 1840s. The site that was the location of the pole that was proposed on our private grounds was 2 feet from the listed building. I'm not sure that the planning controls actually allow for that kind of development on private grounds at 2 feet from a listed building. But suffice to say that that's what alerted me to this whole issue, and I'm aware that there's been a huge backlash against the erection of poles in this part of Birmingham. People are very concerned about their localities being festooned with numerous cables, likening it to a favela in Sao Paulo or somewhere. I'm aware that Preet Gill has written to a director of BRSK because of her concern on this matter, saying that no further poles should be implemented until she's had a meeting with the director and until there's been proper consultation with the local community. Can you just let us know where things stand on that, please, Barry?
Yeah, so forgive me, Magdalen Court, is that the one junction of Clarendon Road and Burnham Road?
Exactly.
Yeah, we're not installing poles there.
Okay, but in terms of the wider issue in the community and Preet Gill's request to have a meeting with one of your directors before further work on the pole implementation continues, can you comment on that?
Yeah, certainly. So listen, I'll be completely open with you. I've made several attempts myself and some of my senior leadership team to arrange a meeting with Preet. Unfortunately, as it stands at the moment, that hasn't happened. For whatever reason, whether her availability has not been, it's just simply not been there. But we haven't been able to have that conversation as yet. Still waiting on hearing back from Preet and her office on that one.
Well, thank you. Given the level of concern, are you able to say what your current position is in relation to the installation of poles in this area, given what I've said, the background to it?
So look, we're sympathetic to the pole installations. There's these two high-profile locations that I think we've talked about, obviously this being one and the other one being Perrott's Folly. I have overall responsibility for where the infrastructure is installed. The way that our network is planned, it's done via desktop planning, simply because of the volume of work involved. However, it is all sanity checked. Now, at the point where it's sanity checked, those were removed, so that won't be happening. It's difficult to sort of talk about a location, overall area, because every location within there is different. There's houses that are built at the turn of the 20th century versus new build properties as well, and it really is very much dependent upon the existing infrastructure and how they're fed. Now, utopia to me is that there's underground ducts and a network that feeds to everybody's property. That for us enables us to deploy at speed and makes it far easier and quicker. We do a lot of work, and you would have seen a lot of our civils teams around clearing underground blockages and underground ducts. So we are, in essence, upgrading what's there now by simply clearing those blockages. So it's very difficult for me to comment, as I say, on an overall area. But I'm happy to look at everybody's property on an individual case-by-case basis.
Okay, I understand your concern about the, just be very brief, Marcus, about being able to comment on the wide area, but where you become aware, Barry, of a very strong concern by residents, what will your position be then? Will you halt until there's been some further consultation?
Absolutely, yeah. So you know, I can assure you that there's several incidences where I put the build on hold in the interim to take a step back and look at how we do go about progressing this. You know, there are some areas, I say, that we've had to sort of we've intentionally put the brakes on until we're further down in the build, and then we'll decide you know, what's sort of the best course of action. But you know, I can assure you that no build will take place in these areas without consultation with residents.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions, Peter. It's really appreciated, and it's great to hear from local residents on this. It's slightly disappointing to hear that a meeting's still not been arranged with Preet as the MP. I certainly hope that the blockage isn't from Preet's side, but I understand that, you know, diaries of members of parliament are incredibly busy, and to find a slot is a challenge at the best of times. So we'll certainly feed that back as local councillors and engage with her office in the hopes that a meeting can be set up very soon. I'm going to bring the hands in order. So if we can move on to Anne Julie next, please.
Hi there. Thanks for that. Hi Barry, my name's Anjali and I live on Montague Road, which isn't too far away from Magdalen Court.
No, I know exactly where it is. Yeah, absolutely.
If you've just been kind enough to give Peter the assurance that there won't be any poles installed on Vernon Road and Clarendon Road, is that because you're thinking now? I mean, I didn't know whether that was always the plan, that you'd shifted it over to Montague Road, and the site that you propose on Montague Road is directly in front of my house, and obviously it affects my property. So I don't know whether you can give me a similar assurance that you won't be thinking about installing a pole there.
Yes, we can, absolutely. There's 2 poles that I have planned in Montague Road. Again, I've taken them out of the design, so they won't be happening.
Thank you. But that's really reassuring, and I'm glad the meeting's being recorded. But I had a conversation with your colleague Jamie months ago now.
Yeah, so Jamie was my community engagement manager. He's no longer part of my business, but not as a result of Montague Road. However, yeah, having looked on that, reflected on it, and we've decided to take those 2 poles out.
That's great. The reason that I brought Jamie into it was obviously because we had a conversation. He assured me that there wouldn't be a pole, and then people turned up outside my property and installed a pole that they had to take down because, because obviously we'd had discussions and we'd received an assurance from Jamie that there wouldn't be one installed without telling us first. Sure. So I'm really grateful for the assurance that you've given today. As I said, I'm glad the meeting's being recorded, but that's really helpful to me. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Anjali. And I think that kind of speaks to the frustrations that we shared in our initial meeting with Barry and his colleague about some of the engagement process that had taken place. Before, really pleased to see that, you know, Barry's showing a renewed commitment from BRSK to engage on certain locations and be able to provide assurances where poles will not be built. I did see there was a hand up from Lizzie. Is Lizzie still here? If Lizzie does come back, we'll bring her in. But in the meantime, Marion, your hand was up next.
Hi Barry, we have met. I was at the Parrots Folly protest.
Yes, indeed, Marion. How are you? You well?
I'm good. And so you know what I'm going to say, that there wasn't any consultation. I mean, it's great we're having this meeting, but it's too late because the polls are already up. And I tried really hard to object to the polls in Carlisle Road, where I live, with no response. You have responded to my protest about the Folly poll, but not about the Carlisle Road polls, and they're up now. And I've lived in Carlisle Road for more than 50 years, so I remember Birmingham Cable putting the cable in, and the cables went in, and if you wanted the cable to your house, they dug up your garden and put a little cable in. I mean, you know that is absolutely possible. It wasn't a disruptive process particularly at all, and the upgrade by Virgin to fibre optic, the full fibre optics was practically unnoticed. You know, it's just kind of happened, and that's also another point that I want to make, that we already have a very good fibre optic, full fibre broadband service, and we have a G5 tower at the bottom of Carlisle Road, which also went up without any consultation. So this is also a point for the councillors, that how can these things happen without prior consultation? So thank you.
So Marion, I don't want to kind of lean too much on legislation, because that's not really, that's not really what we're about. There are acts in place that give permitted development rights to telecommunications providers. Now, regardless of whatever political party you support, I think it's something that can be agreed upon, that we as a country are woefully behind in terms of broadband connection speed and accessibility to the internet. And so it's always very challenging to be able to build our network without the utilisation of poles, but it's simply just what's needed. And I know your street quite well. I know it's obviously a terrace street, and the majority of that infrastructure is kind of buried in the ground. So it's unfortunate that we've had to utilise poles in this instance, but we've kind of, as much as we possibly can, we've taken into account people's houses. So we've tried to not block people's views, or not build the poles in such a way that they cause disruption.
It's the cables, it's not the poles, it's the associated cables that are going to ruin everything.
It's the cables are they are, we keep them to a minimum. We only put up what we absolutely need to. There won't be crisscrossing or anything like that at all. They're built and designed in exactly the same way as, say, for example, the next road along Stirling Road, or you go down to Waterworks Road. They're exactly the same as what's along there as well. They won't be sort of crisscrossing or anything like that.
But they are crisscrossing on Waterworks Road.
They no, I disagree. I don't think they are. I've looked at what's down there, and I spent quite some time along Waterworks Road, just kind of having a look at the different properties that are down there and how they are fed. And they go back to a central location from a property, i.e. to that pole, and ours do exactly the same.
Before I bring in, thank you for your question first of all, Marion, and before I do bring in Lizzie, who's got a hand up, I kind of do want to speak to your point specifically about how the rollout has been possible without kind of extensive consultation with the local community, and it is something that I certainly share your concerns about. I can't speak to the specific legislation, unfortunately, that has allowed a rollout without consultation. But it's certainly a point I think that would be particularly pressing for the Member of Parliament to bring up, as if it's legislation that's on the statute books from Westminster, then it's certainly something that, in her particular capacity, she would be able to raise with the relevant ministers. I am going to bring Lizzie in now, and I can see, Sharon, that you wanted to put your hand up to make a contribution as well. So we'll bring you in after, if that's okay. I know that Lizzie might have had a couple of connection issues though, so can I bring you in, Lizzie?
Yes, yeah, sorry, I'm going to leave the camera off just in case there's tech issues again. Thank you for waiting for me. I'm sorry as well for again for interrupting earlier. Yeah, so we had originally a pole that was planned to go outside Parrott's Folly, and whilst that individual pole was moved by BRSK to across the road, it transpired that many of our local community participants for our activities were impacted by the poles as well. We did what research were able to do around telecommunications in terms of it being a permitted development. Something that legislation says is really that telecommunication poles, so these broadband poles, should only really be used as a last resort where there's not already infrastructure in place. So along our road, most of the roads that are affected and most of the people on this meeting, we already have Virgin cable running under pavements. We already have BT running again underground, which are fibre capable. So there is an immediate question around what is the actual need for this. Early days when we spoke to BRSK, I asked them, okay, so what surveying have you done to demonstrate there's need or desire for your broadband? I think for the wider members of the group as well, I'm not sure what the kind of whether you're really aware, but if BRSK connect a cable to your home directly, you can't then choose a different broadband provider. You always have to stay with BRSK. So whilst in legislation it was intended to increase competition, the danger is that you'll be locked into one provider and may have to go through the entire process again to have another provider. There also, as far as I'm aware, something that AltNet, so that's alternative networks, and altnets are kind of the name for people like BRSK and other providers that you're seeing across the country. What they should really be doing is surveying the underground systems to see whether there are ducts or not, because at the moment, if BRSK haven't actually done those surveys, you can't confirm that there is only armoured cables under the ground. The other thing that could happen potentially, which would resolve the issues, is if BRSK actually asked which houses wanted the cables and wanted the internet, then those houses.
Is it just me that's lost Lizzie?
No.
I've lost the sound. I can see her, but the sound's gone.
She's
Okay.
on mute.
Oh no, it's okay. I'm I logged in with my telephone as well because my computer it's quite an old computer and it's being a bit temperamental. Sorry, I'm sorry, it's a bit of a rambling thing, but I think sometimes context is really important. So I'm not if I'm repeating myself, apologies, but essentially legislation says that poles should only be going up in spaces where there's not existing infrastructure and not existing access to fibre broadband. In our areas, we've already got BT broadband, we've already got Virgin. Both of those companies seem to have no issue putting cables underground. So with the Telegraph poles as well, as Marcus already pointed out, there's potentially not a limit of how many of those can go up. So BRSK might come this year, we might have other providers coming down the line. When people have the wires from the poles attached to their homes, they can't then go and use a different provider. They have to always stay with BRSK. So whilst at the moment Barry's saying that the company have competitive deals on, that can't be guaranteed in the future because Barry's company is a corporate. There aren't really legislation in place to prevent price hikes potentially in the future. Not saying that it would happen, but that is a risk. So whilst the legislation was intended to increase competition, what it potentially might do is limit access and limit competition for consumers. And the last thing that I was saying was that potentially to resolve all of the problems is that BRSK, if they did thorough surveying and really assessed who actually wants these wants BRSK broadband to their homes. From the people we've spoken to, most people are happy with their providers, or they don't want a pole, they'd rather have underground cabling. So in the event that, assumed that might be a small number, then BRSK can make direct contact with ducting underground. And if it cut off, and I've repeated myself, I'm sorry, but as far as I'm aware, Barry's predecessor or one of his colleagues told me that they had not done surveying in the area to understand what the actual need from the local residents or the desire to have that broadband from BRSK was. So until that's done, surely that's the first point of a consultation. Surely that, from a business perspective as well, determines whether you come into an area and whether you make the investment, because BRSK is a private company. It has investors that used to be part of a South African firm called Vumatel, I believe, which were wildly successful in South Africa. But Barry said it's been operating for a couple of years. The company was only registered 18 months ago. It's registered to a space in London, which is just a post box. It's not an actual space. And for me, that there's a disconnect here with what we're being told and what can be readily available and found on the internet, both in terms of government intention, what's been communicated by BRSK to myself and other local residents, and what action could take. I'm so sorry it's so long, but also Marcus and Sharon, within legislation and within the Highways Act, it is possible for you to decline and stop companies, outlets building on pavements. The council get paid money for a company such as BRSK to install things on pavements. So, you know, I find that quite difficult as well, that the council are so willing to disrupt people's local environments and spaces that are important to them and negatively impact them, which at the minute it's, you know, it's corporate profit that's being prioritising from my perspective, not local residents. I'm sorry it was so long. I will be quiet now.
Thank you for your contribution, Lizzie. It's really important to us as local councillors that, you know, it doesn't matter if your contribution is long or short. It's really important that it's heard at this meeting so that everyone gets to have their say. I'm going to bring you in, Barry, on the several points that Lizzie raised, but I think there's a few there. One is on whether or not telegraph poles are being used as a last resort. Or, you know, if adequate surveying of ducts that already exists has taken place. The second is with regards to the demand and the need of local residents for additional service providers. The third possibly around how BRSK is operating within the existing legislation that allows them to come into communities and essentially set up shop as a new provider. And I think the final point with regards to kind of our ability as councillors to block certain things being built or whatnot, it's not something that I'm able to answer this evening, Lizzie. I don't know if Sharon will be able to answer in her contribution, but it's rest assured that concern has been registered and we will come back to you. So Barry.
Okay, so thank you, Lizzie. Regards to underground surveys, prior to any works commencing, we instruct our build partner to carry out extensive underground surveys. Now, we have access to all of BT's records in terms of their existing infrastructure, so their duct network, their poles network, etc. We then carry out our own checks because we need to firstly understand if what the information we're given is correct. And secondly, we need to know if those ducts or poles, for that matter, are usable. Now, it could be that those ducts are congested already, so there's already cables in there to a point where we simply couldn't install our own, or there's you know, these ducts could have been in the ground for many decades and they've suffered damage. You know, there's whether that be that they've slipped or moved, or whether other services may have damaged them. So we need to understand if we need to work on clearing any blockages within there. So yeah, absolutely, we carry out surveys before any works commence, and that is part of the overall costing of a build area to me. So we need to look at that. We need to understand then, you know, what additional requirements there are in terms of infrastructure. And I'm sorry, I've started writing down the points that Lizzie raised.
The second, Barry, was with regards to the demand in the local area.
Yes,
If BRSK has analysed whether or not an additional service is required.
So, you know, the way that what we do is obviously offer an alternative. So, as I've talked about earlier on, the majority of what's in the ground now is copper based, and that can only handle and cope with a finite amount of broadband traffic or speed. And fibre is, you know, without wishing to sound like a salesman, but fibre is essentially the future. It can cope with obviously far more. Now, what we build, we're not building it for 3 years or 5 years. What we put in now is designed for long term. So, you know, 50 years, potentially more. Who knows, really? Fibre doesn't suffer the same sort of degradation that copper does. You know, fibre doesn't turn green. If it gets wet, it doesn't crackle, or you know, it doesn't drop out. You can submerge fibre. It doesn't have any metal in it. So you can submerge fibre underground, underwater, and it won't degrade. Now, in terms of what we do with regards to understanding if people want the service. Now, I guess some of it is that, you know, we install it on the hope that people do take up that service. Now, whilst you may not wish to have it now, you may wish to have it in the future, or you may move home and the people that buy your property or move into your property after you may decide that they want it. So I think it's perhaps a little short-sighted to think that we wouldn't take a long-term view on this and the need for this. You know, I think back about many different products or inventions over the years that people might have, you know, dismissed, but are now avid fans or users of. And the way that I see it is that simply that, you know, whilst you may not wish to have it now, you may wish to have it in the future, or people in your property, moving into your property in the future, may wish to take up that service.
Before I bring in Sharon, Barry, just to kind of focus on one of Liz's points, which I think was an incredibly prescient point. You can confirm that, you know, BRSK is operating absolutely within the legislative framework that has been, you know, outlined for installation and rollout of broadband. Absolutely,
yeah, wholeheartedly, 100%. We're licensed to do what we do. We're not just licensed by the government to do what we do, but we also obviously have a license with BT Openreach to utilise their infrastructure. Now, if we was not meeting their rules and regulations around that, then we would, you know, we'd be quite quickly kicked off of their network.
I'm just going to bring Sharon in now because I can see
actually, just before you do, Marcus, there was just one other thing, and that was around money and payments. And you know, it's really kind of disappointing to hear things like that. We don't make any direct payment to any local authorities in any way, shape or form. The only payments that we make to local authorities are when we make an application for a permit to work in the highways. Now, the cost of that it's not a huge amount of money at all, and I can't see that there's any real profit to be made within that.
Thanks, Barry. I'm going to bring Sharon in now.
Thanks, Marcus. I think, Marcus, you made my point earlier on because it was in relation to the legislation. local councillors do not have jurisdiction over the legislation, and we never have in a sense. But I do know that Preet has definitely written to, from what I saw online, that she'd written to Michael Gove asking questions in relation to this particular scheme and its effect in terms of the legislation as well. And I think, that's she's doing exactly what a good MP would do in terms of writing and putting in those concerns that she has in terms of the legislation and the loopholes that sometimes that we see happen, where locally we don't get that notification that you would on other things. So just to kind of reassure residents that their Member of Parliament has taken it seriously and has written with concerns in terms of the legislation, which again is outside of our remit. But Barry, just for me, I know that, and thank you again for you and your colleague meeting with Marcus and myself, and we requested to meet with you. One of the things that would be helpful, because I know that and I know when somebody else spoke a bit earlier on and talked about the fact that actually she'd been given reassurances from your former colleague around some of the things that were taking place on behalf of your organisation. But clearly engagement didn't take place with residents the way that it possibly could have. And what would be helpful if you can just give that kind of reassurance of what engagement should look like and will look like moving forward in terms of anything that happens in relation to North Edgbaston, because this has raised a huge amount of concern and upset locally, and sometimes a lot of these things start off with the point of communication and being clear on what consultation is and sometimes engagement is and what notification is, because sometimes we use these words loosely like they're all the same thing when actually they're not. So I just think it'd be helpful if you can just sort of tell residents what you intend to do moving forward and actually what that looks like within the local area.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first things first, we commit to doing a first letter drop, so we let residents know that we're coming into an area. Secondly, we'll then contact where required to with regards to, say, polls, for example. We'll contact specific residents moving forward to let them know what we're going to be doing. I'm also willing to commit to having more direct conversations with residents around the siting of our street furniture as well. So whether that be polls or chambers, happy to kind of have those conversations, and I'll ensure that this happens. Now, if and I'm willing to commit to, if for any reason anybody here or any other residents feel that they're not getting that, then I'd encourage them to talk to the councillors, who in turn please come to me, and I'll make sure that those conversations happen.
Thanks. Did you have any thoughts on that, Sharon?
No, I think that was the key thing, and also just that, I guess the key thing for me was when we did put the inquiry into the council, and as much as it sounded complicated in terms of the response that they gave, it was very clear that what they were saying was, on some cases, when things are installed in local areas, there is a requirement for them to do notification and proper consultation, as what we would call proper consultation. And then in other areas, which this, in terms of my understanding, was fibre optics, they don't have to follow that same procedure. Is that right, Barry?
Yeah, you're correct. It's not we don't have to follow as stringent a procedure, but we're choosing to be more engaging with residents and to kind of have those conversations. I think a lot of what a lot of people's concerns are is around sort of fear, and particularly with things like 5G masts popping up, and the concerns that people have, rightly or wrongly, around health and so on. I think it's really important for us to have those conversations and dispel that. Now, one thing I would just like to add is that our network is what's called a passive network. So there's no power running through that whatsoever. So there's no voltage at the top of any of our poles or anything like that at all. Fiber optic broadband, in essence, is a flashing light, and it flashes millions of times per second. Whereas even copper broadband, that is a 50 volt electrical signal. So there is no power in this network at all. So there's no risk to people's life or health as a result of the light passing through the cables.
And just a follow up. Sorry, Marcus, just a really quick follow up. In terms of that, is there what will BRSK be doing moving forward? Because I know one thing is following the legislation, and then there's a separate thing that sometimes is just good practice. What are you doing to make sure that there's good practice in place, which sometimes falls outside of the legislation and actually is what local people are really interested in?
So I think, as I say, I've got new people in my community engagement team, and I'm ensuring that they're out and about and having more conversations with people, and we're more visible before the build starts.
Thank you for that, Barry. I am mindful, but rest assured I have noticed that there are additional questions in the chat on this particular item. So I'm going to ask that Kay, who is one of our council officers present from the NDSU, can you just make a note of any additional questions, please? And hopefully, Barry, we can get a commitment from yourself that when those are sent through, we'll get a bit of a Q&A back for those remaining questions.
Most definitely, yeah. Kay, if you can send them over to me on email, I'll more than happily answer every single one of those and get them back to you.
Thank you. And can I just say thanks to everyone who asked a question as well this evening, because I know that this is an issue that has caused some consternation, I think, in the area, and kind of constructive discussion with Barry present. And we're incredibly grateful for Barry's answers to those questions. So thanks again, Barry, for joining us.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. So that moves us on really to the item on our agenda, which is updates from us as local councillors. I hope that everyone who is in the meeting this evening is a member of our North Edgbaston Ward Updates WhatsApp group, because it is a really fantastic way to stay up to date with all of our activity as your ward councillors. You get around 2 updates every day. We try not to spam people, but it's a fantastic way to see what's happening in the ward and also what we're doing as the ward councillors. I'm sure some of you may have noticed that at the start of the month we launched our North Edgbaston Christmas appeal, and we were really pleased to be joining with partners from Christchurch Summerfield, City Road Methodist Church, Companions for Hope and St Germain's in fundraising for food boxes for vulnerable families and individuals in North Edgbaston. We are absolutely delighted and overwhelmed with the response from our residents, and pleased that thanks to the generous contributions of our residents and of our partners in business as well, that we've raised over £1,200 for that campaign. It's a huge amount of money that is going to make a direct positive impact on people who are struggling this winter. So we're shortly going to be launching a kind of self-referral form for people who may wish to apply for one of those food boxes. But we will be going to Neighbour Night on, I think it's Wednesday, the 6th of December, where we'll be packing those boxes with the help of residents. And Tim and Tammy have kindly offered to kind of use Neighbour Night as an opportunity to host that activity. So please do join us on that day if you want to take part. Some other great news is that Lord Mayor, Councillor Chaman Lal, will be joining us on that evening to thank all of our volunteers and thank those who made generous donations as well. So that's just a short update from me, mostly thanks and gratitude to our residents for contributing to that winter appeal. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Sharon, on councillor updates?
Yeah, just from me as well, just echoing what you said, Marcus. I'm absolutely delighted with the amount of money that we've managed to raise, from the local community and also people that partner in the ward, that'll make a difference to people. And although we've hit the £1,000 mark and gone over that to 1,200, we still have time to raise a little bit more. So please share the link with people because it'll go a long way. I know over recent months, since the summer really, and we've had a number of issues with Summerfield Park and the reservoir in terms of encampments turning up on those. We have again raised with the chief executive and her team to ask them for a more, what I would say, a sustainable solution around making sure that those spaces are better secured, to stop the vans from driving on there, because that's ultimately what the problem is that we're seeing across there. And there was a lot of disruption, particularly I'd say more so on not Summerfield, more so on the reservoir, with the bikes and stuff like that. So we're waiting for a response to come back from that, and as soon as we get one, we will of course share that with residents.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that from Sharon, I shared in the WhatsApp group earlier just a clip from Neighbourhoods Committee, which I sit on, where I asked officers to prepare a report for our January meeting between both enforcement and parks about the incursions. The important thing for me is that, you know, obviously it caused a lot of disruption to our residents, it costs money for cleanup and whatnot, but it needs to be managed in a sensitive way that doesn't vilify certain communities. And, you know, the fact of the matter is we have a very suitable transit site in Nechells that has unfortunately been closed for the last few months. And I think there certainly are some questions to be answered from council officers about why that is case, and how it would be possible to maybe safely move people onto that site as an alternative. So rest assured, that's part of the work plan for Neighbourhoods Committee, and I hope to bring residents some more news in the new year about that report. I think that's it for updates for now. I'm really interested in getting feedback from our residents about how they feel about virtual meetings. I realise that people do like to be present in person, and I think it's good to have that balance when we can get officers there in the flesh. But, you know, any feedback that residents do have about a kind of hybrid style meeting, please do make sure that you share it with us. In which case, I am going to we'll make sure that Kay also gives us a readout of any comments that have been left in the chat as well, if there's any questions that need to be answered. Thank you very much. Oh, we've got a hand from Chris, and I think we've got a hand from Eva. So if I can bring in Eva first, and then I'll bring in Chris.
Just very quickly, there are a couple of points from Deborah. She said she would be doing some work on and coming back to you. How will that information be fed back to both Lizzie and myself? So
what I would ask is that Kay will create minutes of the meeting and will make sure that they are circulated to us as ward councillors. I am under no doubt that Deborah will be on top of all of the things that that she is committed to do. However, I'll make sure that I push from my side to get full responses to the questions that have been asked by residents. So I will let you know when I've done that, Eva, but I'll also make sure that, you know, when I hear back from Deborah, that is circulated. It might actually be worthwhile for us to bring it to a future ward forum meeting as well, but I won't make you wait that long to get a response. When I do get one, it will be sent out. Sharon, did you want to come in, and then I'll bring in Chris?
Yeah, it was just, if it'll probably be helpful, Eve, if yourself and Lizzie just I know it might sound a little bit tedious, but just drop us a note just to give us permission to share your email addresses with Deborah. So then we'll send an email just to remind her. So one, that you can get them directly to you as soon as that comes in, and then we can share more broadly. But I think, as Marcus said, it's really important that you both get yours first. Well, you know, it's directly to your inquiries.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Sharon. Chris, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. I just wanted to mention that there's a meeting at the Summerfield Police Station tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock for residents who are in their catchment area, just to keep up to date with what's happening with the police and any local issues that people might want to raise. So it's not generally known, but it's a a very good way of speaking to the police directly if you've got the time.
Chris, can you please drop me an email after this call with the full details of that meeting? I'll make sure that it's circulated first thing tomorrow morning in the WhatsApp group so other residents are aware of that meeting.
Okay, thank you. I will do.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'll just unmute myself. Thank you very much to everyone for attending and for their contributions this evening. I think it's been a really productive meeting. It was great to hear from Deborah and have that Q&A section, but also to offer our constructive feedback, shall we say, to Barry of BRSK about the Telegraph pole installations. Our next Ward Forum meeting will be in the new year, and we will ask Kay to circulate the details of that when they're firmed up. Please do email us any suggestions of people that you would want to hear from at Ward Forum meetings, or any themes that you would like to have at Ward Forum meetings, and we will certainly try and get the relevant guests present for the Ward Forum meetings. So thank you very much all. Hope to see some of you in December for our winter appeal, box packing and whatnot. If we don't, please do have a lovely festive period. Thank you.
Very well
Cheers.
chaired, Marcus. Well done.
Thanks, Patrick. Cheers all. Thanks very much.
Cheers,
Have a
Sharon.
good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.